Sky King, do not answer. Victor, Foxtrot, authentication, Delta Golf. I say again, Sky King, do not answer.
This is Collapse Out.
From London, England, a podcast about mysteries, the paranormal, and phenomena. You are listening to Anomaly. Here is your host, Glitters.
Hello, Glitters here in London with a delayed new podcast, and our sincere apologies for that. But life has been incredibly busy here in the UK. This time around, an absolute treat for you. This goes back to December 2016 when I had the opportunity to interview Steph Young. Steph is an author of books about mysteries and missing people. You should love this. It was a great interview and I was very honoured to speak to her. And so we welcome Steph Young to the show. Steph Young has a BA in business and is a qualified English tutor. She grew up reading paranormal magazines in the UK and began to write freelance articles on the paranormal and supernatural. She gathered so much research, she decided to put them into books. She's now an independent researcher addicted to researching all paranormal, supernatural, esoteric and enigmatic mysteries. Each book she writes seems to lead her to further questions and searches for answers as the mysteries inevitably deepen and develop into ever more complex riddles in the spectrum of the unknown. Steph Young, hello.
Hello, thank you for having me on.
No, thank you for coming on. It's taken a little bit of time to get you. You're very popular. Did you write that bio?
Might have done. Yeah. Yeah, I did.
I really had to concentrate on reading that one. So it's all
quite
good.
long, isn't it?
It is actually, yeah. So as I was saying, Steph, you are a difficult person to get hold of, and you're on quite a few radio shows around the world. I've heard you on Midnight in the Desert with Heather Wade and Coast to Coast, and also you're friends with Soraya as well.
I am. I consider myself very, very lucky to have been asked to go on those shows, because that's how I got interested in these kind of topics, by listening to these shows. So I'm very, very thankful.
No, that's good. And so out of an average week, I mean, how many requests do you get to go on the radio?
Quite a few, really. Quite a few. I kind of don't accept them all, really, I suppose, because I do spend about 16 hours a day researching as well. So I'm addicted to doing the research, and sometimes it's hard to find the time to do the shows.
Absolutely, yeah. But, you've got to write those books, and if you're going to write those, you've got to do the research as well. How do you sort of spend your time researching? Is it an all-day thing? Yeah,
absolutely. From the moment I get up, because it's compulsive to me, because some of the stories that I come across, which are true stories, have so many different angles, or they might have some really cryptic clues to them, or you think that you've found a case which is, for example, clearly an alien abduction, but when you look into all the possibilities and you find more evidence, it can take you in an entirely different direction. So that's what fascinates me, the way that stories can go down really long winding paths and veer off, and you never know what you're going to find.
No, it's very true. I think once you start scratching away at the surface of a story, it can be amazing what creeps out from underneath. Just tell us a little bit about your background, Steph. It says here you're a qualified English tutor. So did you ever work as a teacher or a tutor itself?
Yeah, I used to teach English language at language colleges, and I also worked as a private tutor in English literature. So that was teaching A-level English, to help with the exams.
Excellent. Okay. So, for our international listeners, A-level here in the UK is, I don't know how that would translate to, say, the American school system, but it's above high school, I guess is probably the easiest way to say it. So, apart from the tutoring, what other jobs have you had in the past?
I have worked with patients with learning disabilities and challenging behaviour, being their therapist, not a counsellor therapist, a recreational therapist. So you do all the fun activities with them, so playing cricket, having discos, going for picnics,
Yeah.
that sort of thing.
So it's all hard
But
work
also,
then.
yeah, all the fun things. But also, I did work in secure units as well, which is working with very, very dangerous people.
Sure.
Playing ping pong and indoor cricket. Yeah,
Oh,
so that's good.
You see, and as much as I love to explain to people about Englishisms, as I call them, I'm not even going to begin to try and explain cricket. I don't understand it. And I'm sure our American friends who have got their own strange sports, it's fair to say, I just wouldn't know where to start with cricket. Okay, so you have been writing books for how long now?
About 4 or 5 years, because when I actually got into it by writing to a magazine that you can get in. I got today actually in Smith's. It's very exciting, and it's called Fate and Fortune, and there's another one as well. So they have all paranormal experiences that people send in, true stories, and that fascinated me for years, reading those stories. And one day I thought, well, I really would like to write about this myself. And so I contacted them and I said, would you like a story about mysterious beasts in the forests? They said yes.
Of course.
And so I thought, oh no, what have I done? I'm going to have to write it now. And so I wrote it, and I was so lucky that they said, oh, it's really good, and they didn't tell me it was rubbish. So I started writing articles, but I mean, there's not that many magazines out there, with the advance of the internet. So then I thought, well, okay, I'm going to write some books, and that's how it progressed.
I find with magazines now, and I've not read Fate or Fortune, excuse me, but I get the 14 Times every month.
Oh, that's great, isn't it?
It is great, but what I've noticed with magazines is that the price of them is going through the roof, and I think that's really because of the internet. And rather than waiting every month for something to drop onto the mat or to run off to Smith's like you did today, it's so much easier just to Google something and read. But I think what you miss when you don't get the magazines is that is the research that goes into it. Certainly people like you, people like Nick Redfern, do an awful lot of research before writing your articles, and so you can reference what you're saying if you have to, whereas somebody who's doing a website perhaps can just write whatever they like. So you're getting a quality article. Perhaps it's probably the easiest way to say it.
I think you're right. So maybe for every page that I write, might have taken me 6 weeks, 6 weeks to get all the information together.
Sorry, did you say for each page?
Sometimes, yeah, it could
do.
If it's not each page, maybe that's a silly thing to say. I mean, maybe each story, so maybe 3 or 4 pages would be one story, true story that you've come across. But to get to the kernel of truth inside of it, it could take you weeks. I remember once I was looking into a story about a famous artist who there was the suggestion that he had been influenced by black-eyed kids, these apparitions of children that appear that have got jet black eyes with no white in them at all. And that took me months and months to work on, with all the connections that maybe there were UFO sightings around the same time, and there was a story connected to it where 2 little boys had somehow or other been able to transport themselves out of locked rooms and appear on boats in a port 20 or so miles away. No. And so there were all these really strange connections related to it that took months and months to look into.
And that's in one of your books?
It's in one of the books, yeah.
Do you, off the top of your head, do you remember which one that is? Because I'd really be interested in that.
That's in Hunted in the Woods.
Hunted in the Woods. Okay, I'll make a note of that.
Yeah.
That is cool. Okay.
And I still don't think I've got to the bottom of it.
No, but then, I think part of the art of this is that, you can faithfully retell a story as told to you and report everything that you know about it without feeling the need to be able to put a cap on it, and just say, right, this is the answer. Because sometimes you're never going to have the answer. No,
that's it. And people will have different opinions as well. So I might say it was clearly this, but actually perhaps it wasn't. And I'm not an expert in this at all. I'm just a researcher. So what I love about this field as well is that people who are interested in it often have so much information or so much experience in researching or studying or reading about these things themselves, that's great, because the contribution that everybody puts into it can be really fascinating. You get all different sides to what could be the same story.
Sure. Do you feel that you come under much pressure from people to actually give an answer to a mystery?
No, I like to think that people enjoy the fact that I look at something from every perspective. So instead of focusing in on one thing, I'll look at every possible solution that there could be to it, but I'll leave it for them to decide. So
Yeah.
I won't say this is what happened. I'll say you have a range of options here, and you can decide what you think might have happened. So if something mysterious happens in the woods and this strange creature appears, well, it could be that could be could be a mutant program that's gone wrong and this monster's turned up in the woods, or it could be somebody who's hallucinating because they're very,
Yeah.
very tired and they haven't eaten or drunk, or it could be that there's really a demonic apparition that's appeared. It could be something that's come out of a portal or a dimension. It could be something from another planet. It goes on, and that's for the reader to decide.
Sure, but so really what you're doing then is you're retelling the information with an open mind to allow somebody else to come to their own conclusions.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Okay. When I was doing a bit of research on you, I was listening to an episode, one of Soraya's shows, and he referred to you, I don't know whether you know it or not, but he rather than being an author or anything else, he referred to you as being a collector of strange stories, which I thought was a really interesting way to put it. Do you see yourself as a collector?
Yes.
Okay.
I like that because although I haven't read that many books in this arena, and I should have done, but I always feel like I'd like to be Charles Fort, who
Yeah.
would spend all of his time in the library and not leave and just look at all the newspapers and go back over years and years and just find all these strange stories. So I like that. Yeah, I like that kind of appeal. Yeah.
That's good in a way as well, because if you are collecting stories and you've got the passion to learn, you strike me as somebody who's got the passion for research, and you're not, how can I put it, being mercenary. You're not being mercenary at all. You're putting out what you have for people to get, and people choose to buy the books. That's great. You're quite well published on Amazon, I believe.
Yeah.
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 So, some of your books, are they all are they all ebooks, or can you get paperback copies?
I've put them into paperbacks actually, and a lovely man who's a very great artist was so kind and did all of my new covers for me. So I'm so pleased now because they look really scary.
I did see some of those on Facebook actually. I thought they were very good.
They're good, aren't they? Yeah.
Absolutely. Should we give them a name check or?
Oh, Martin Kimberley.
Martin Kimberley.
He's on Facebook. It's on the back of my books on the paperbacks, and it's also inside my Kindle books. So it's Martin Kimberley, Martin.Kimberley on Facebook. Great artist.
Excellent. No, we'll look into that a bit deeper. So he's obviously got an interest in this topic as well.
Well, I don't know so much that he has actually, but somebody contacted me, a friend of his, I think it must have been, and he'd made the comment on this man's Facebook and said, oh, one of her books would be great with some of your art. And I saw the comment and I said, yes, it would. Please,
Okay.
Can I have some? He was so kind. He did it for nothing for me. I mean,
Oh,
there are
bless.
some amazingly kind people in this field, and that I'm always grateful when I come across somebody like that.
That's
so kind.
excellent. Yeah, that's really good. All right, well, let's talk about the stories then. So the first case we're going to talk about today is the mysterious disappearance and death of an American guy called Henry McCabe. Steph, could you walk us through the basics on the Henry McCabe story, please?
Well, Henry McCabe disappeared on Labour Day, which is September the 7th, back in 2015. He lived in Minnesota, and he was a tax auditor for the authorities there. Well, he'd gone to a nightclub with a couple of friends, and his wife was away staying with friends. He had quite a bit to drink, they say, and he asked his friend on the way home to drop him off at a gas station, which I think sort of sold food and things. Well, it seems that then he disappeared. When it was discovered that he had disappeared, that was when the searches began for him. But the thing that caught everybody's attention was the fact that the police eventually released a very, very bone-chilling voicemail message that he had left. Now, whether he'd actually dialed and left that message himself on purpose, or whether somebody had been with him and left that message deliberately, is up for debate. The voice itself is horrific because it's happening at about 2:30 in the morning, and he can be heard screaming and howling and growling as well. It sounds like he's being tortured to death. The screams are just raw, animalistic, and he sounds like he's in agony. Well, I don't know what's happening to him because he was found about 5 days later, after the search had been very, very extensive for him in the area that they believed he'd disappeared in. But he was 7 miles away, and he was found by a kayaker, and he was half submerged in the water. But the very strange thing is that although they deemed that his death was probably caused by drowning, there were no marks on his body. There weren't even any defensive wounds on his body. So there was nothing there to explain why he'd been screaming and howling and growling. And there's also the belief that at the end of the voicemail, he had actually been with somebody because somebody else could be heard saying to him, "Stop it," in a very, very cold, very calm and controlled voice. So, of course, this story sort of went all over the internet because it was so disturbing, the actual sound of what's going on. But it's so difficult to explain what was happening because it didn't leave any marks. So was he being tasered? Possibly, but again, no marks. Was he being waterboarded? I don't think so. So many people have sort of said, well, was there some kind of supernatural thing going on? And I mean, actually, somebody did contact me, somebody that I have a lot of liaison with, in fact, over deaths very like this that could perhaps be related, but may not be. And he said to me, I was doing some sort of EVP type recordings one winter in the same kind of area, not exactly there, but, and he had caught something really horrific as well on his recording, and he sent me that recording and he said, does it sound anything like that? And again, that's really, really chilling, that one. I mean, so that was something that was supposed to have been recorded, something coming from a spiritual dimension and being recorded, like when they do ghost investigations and they find a voice on the recording. Well, I don't know about that. That's one possibility. Was he simply just taken by somebody who knew him, driven away, and left there? I don't know. His mother left a very sort of chilling remark actually when she was interviewed, and she said, and I don't know why, but she said it was almost like my son was taken away and he was delivered to be a sacrifice. Now, I don't know what would make her say that, but that struck a chord with me because I've been looking into a succession of deaths that have been going on for the last 2 decades, where boys or young men, slightly younger actually than Henry, because Henry was in his 31. But these other cases have been going on for 2 decades and were in fact first investigated by a homicide detective and his partner in New York, where college-age boys were going out for the night and being separated somehow from their friends, quite often being thrown out of pubs for being drunk.
Sure.
But in fact, when you look back on the evidence, there's very little evidence that they were causing any kind of disturbance. And they've often left very chilling voicemail messages saying that they're being chased or followed, or they don't know why they're in trouble. We even have a case in Manchester that was very similar, where a man called David Blunkett had left a civic music festival in a civic hall, and he'd been thrown out because he'd had too much to drink, they said, and quite possibly he had. But he phoned his parents in distress, and at first he couldn't actually talk at all, and then he just let out one very long scream. Well,
Good God.
a retired detective again actually looked into this case for a documentary, and he said, well, the police say that he simply fell in. He was found miles away in Manchester from where he'd left the music festival, and he had gone into the water and drowned. But his phone had been almost looked like it'd been placed beside the water. To get into the water, he would have to have climbed a fence. And the police themselves said, well, I think the scream came because he was falling down the slight decline which led to the water. Well, that's all very well and good, but he would have to have still climbed over a fence to get into the water. And his glasses were found beside the phone, so almost as though somebody had placed them there as some kind of taunt, you know. And there, so I mean, I've written a couple of books on these particular cases because they are very, very complex. Not all of them, of the 300, are going to be exactly related. They could be accidents, they could be homicides, totally unrelated, but there is something very, very sinister going on. And I'm working very closely with some people who have a lot of information that at this stage would be very dangerous to release. But
Sure, and we obviously want to steer clear of that.
But yeah, it's so, you know, it's almost like the same with these cases. So you can go from possible explanations. The very mundane explanation is, well, they took some drugs and they drowned, but actually there's evidence that some of them did have drugs in their system, drugs that they'd never tried before and would never really ever have taken, according to their friends. So there's the supposition that actually they're being drugged. But there's the possibility you can look at for the paranormal there. And in fact, it's somebody who made one of the Batman films, went and made a documentary about looking into the cases that had been happening not far from where Henry lived. And they had used EVPs to try and capture anything paranormal on it. And in fact, the only thing that really happened was that their batteries kept dying. So when they were trying to record all the time, the batteries would die when they'd gone out onto the lake to try and record. So people were looking at all sorts of different angles. I think it's a very human element that's causing this, but there's also the possibility of, let's say, sort of metaphysical. People can believe in things like rituals, and the ritual of sacrificing somebody, releasing that person's spirit, and sort of the belief that you can take that person's spirit and use it for yourself to get energy and power and things. Well,
okay, so,
if you don't,
so some sort of dark arts, perhaps.
yeah, and if you don't believe in that, it sounds nonsense. The thing is, though, some people do believe in that.
Yeah.
Now, whether it works or not, again, is debatable. But you could still carry out something like this in the belief that it does work, even though it may not.
Well, that's absolutely right. I mean, you had the case in London a few years ago of baby Adam, for instance. I don't know if you're familiar with that at all, but it was the torso of a young child that was sort of pulled out of the Thames River, where he'd clearly been the victim of some sort of ritual or or attempt at magic or for whatever, and they traced him down to I believe it was a village in Africa somewhere through his DNA. But going back to Henry McCabe, when he was found, what sort of time had elapsed between him going missing and when his body was found? Do you know?
Yeah, it was about 5 days.
Oh, really? That soon? Okay. So he had been at this nightclub, which is now closed down, and he'd been with a friend. And it was reported that his friend had taken his wallet off of him in order to basically to cut him off, i.e. to stop him from drinking any more. Now, whether that's true or not, I don't know. It's just what I read. But I was interested to see basically how much alcohol would have been in his system when he was found. And whether that.
I mean, I could be wrong, Paul, because I haven't looked at this one for quite a while, actually. So it could be that I know that, yes, his wallet was taken off him, and some people were saying, well, that means that the friends were actually going to take him and do something to him, because who would do that? But I think it makes sense if somebody was drunk to take their wallet. It doesn't mean you're going to kill them. It just means you're looking out for them.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that. I think if you have got a friend, I mean, because there's further information that McCabe may have been in some sort of financial difficulty, etc. And if that's the case, then yes, it would make perfect sense for his friends to take his wallet off him and say, right, no more booze for you. And we're going to get you home. Now, when the police got involved and they spoke to the friends who had dropped him off. Initially, I think there was some sort of mistake or confusion about where he was dropped off, and it turned out to be another petrol station a few miles away. So, but there's CCTV footage of him being dropped off. Now, for him to get the 4 miles from that petrol station to where he died, sort of, it either means that he's walked that, and if you're incredibly drunk, that can't be that easy, or he got a lift with somebody else. Who knows? So unfortunately we've got to take a break now, Steph, anyway. What we'll do is we'll just play the adverts. We'll come back after that and just sort of sum it up and then listen to this voice recording and go over that and see what we think. So stay where you are, and we'll be back after this. And we're back. So we've still got Steph Young with us. Steph is an author of books on mysterious disappearances and deaths, and also strange things that happen in the woods. I'm sure I've been witness to a couple of strange things in the woods, but that's not for tonight. So I'll keep that to myself. Thank you very much. So Steph, before the break we were talking about this strange voicemail that had been left by Henry McCabe on his wife's mobile phone. I think you said that she was working away, or she'd gone to her parents or something.
If I remember correctly, I think she's going to stay with some friends.
Okay, so he's taken the opportunity then to go out with his friends for the evening while she's away.
Yeah.
So I just think he's in Minnesota, and she's obviously some distance away. Let's have a listen to this. Now, I believe you said this was about 2:30 in the morning?
Yes.
Okay, now, to people who have heard this before, obviously, it's a strange thing, but for people who hear it for the first time, it can actually be quite disturbing. So see what you can do. I'm going to apologise in advance because I can't find the original audio for this. This is taken from the news on an American TV station, so see what you think.
It's a voicemail unlike anything you've ever heard before. There are 2 minutes worth of noises, bizarre ones, but very little actual talking. Authorities confirmed the disturbing middle-of-the-night call came from Henry McCabe's cell phone. It was Labor Day, September 7th at 2:28 in the morning. McCabe's worried wife heard the message. The tortured grunts suddenly stop. There is silence. Then someone, either Henry or another person, says, "Stop it."
Now, unfortunately, you don't hear the person say "stop it" in this particular clip, and I can't find it anywhere. Have you looked for it yourself online, Steph?
Yeah, it's not there now. It's gone. It was gone ages ago. Yeah.
It's really peculiar because it's something that I remember hearing the whole thing. I absolutely remember hearing the whole thing back last year, and everywhere I look now, it's just not available, which is very peculiar indeed. What as you listen to it again and you refresh your memory, what do you make of that?
I don't understand what those noises are being caused by. The most mundane explanation is somebody very drunk, somebody perhaps had taken some kind of substance that leaves the body quite soon afterwards, but makes you hallucinate. Maybe he really wasn't being hurt, but because it's so chilling to listen to. And I suppose, as I say, it took my attention because I've been looking into so many cases where young men are found drowned, but very often don't have any water in their lungs, so have not been killed in the water, but killed elsewhere. Yeah. I suppose I'm a little bit biased, perhaps, in terms of looking at it from that perspective and thinking there's a lot more to this. But what that answer is, I don't know. I don't know in this case.
Yeah, it's very strange. I mean, my own perspective, I've listened to it a few times now, and it helps, I think, that I've not allowed myself to be told what it is, if that makes sense. I kind of came to my own conclusion on it. And, and I think you hear basically two different people on that clip. I don't know how that sits with you, but I mean, there are some noises on there that sound genuinely like somebody in pain, and there are other noises on there that sound like somebody just making stupid noises. I mean, there's at one stage there I can hear what to me sounds like I don't know, like a chicken clucking, for instance. I mean, I don't wish to downplay it, but it doesn't strike me as the sort of noise that somebody would make when they are in pain. And yet there are other noises on there which, you know, quite obviously are somebody in distress. Which sort of led me to think, well, you know, if the guy's not got that much in the way of injuries on him, then was he perhaps sedated, and somebody was doing something to him, you know, like torturing him with pressure points or something, and that person, as part of that, was making some very peculiar noises. Do you think it would help if we listen to it again?
Yes.
Okay, let's have a little go.
It's a voicemail unlike anything you've ever heard before. There are 2 minutes worth of noises, bizarre ones.
And that's the particular bit which strikes me as weird. That doesn't strike me as the noise of somebody who is in pain, but we'll carry on.
But very little actual talking. Authorities confirmed the disturbing middle-of-the-night call came from Henry McCabe's cell phone. It was Labor Day, September 7th at 2:28 in the morning. McCabe's worried wife heard the message. The tortured grunts suddenly stop. There is silence. Then someone, either Henry or another person, says, "Stop it."
Oh, yeah, it's very peculiar. I don't know what to make of it. I can only go with my first instinct on it, and I could be incredibly wrong. I think probably best.
It's actually a perspective, though, that I don't think many have said. Your perspective that the other person there could have been making some of those noises. So that's quite a good interpretation of it.
Well,
because
it's a
I kind
guess.
of look at it, I kind of listen to it and think he's making all the noise, but you're saying actually no, some of it could actually be the other person causing these noises.
Sure, yeah. I just think whatever it is causing him a great deal of pain and discomfort, but equally, I don't know, perhaps if he had something in his mouth or whatever, you know, then somebody else is acting in a very peculiar way and it's just scaring the life out of him. Do you remember by any chance what sort of injuries he did have?
Well, he didn't have any injuries that showed he'd been tortured or anything that would make that kind of noise. No.
No. Okay.
No.
Fair enough.
That's it. No.
Yeah, it's just really weird. You know, obviously, you know, I'm trying to bear in mind that at the end of the day, there's a bereaved family out there, and I don't want to put a light spin on it at all. It's very important to them, and you know, it's something that people need to get to the bottom of. Do you perhaps know whether the police are still treating it as an open case, or have they just come to a dead end with it now?
Well, as far as I know, it's still open. I do wonder what they might be doing in terms of looking still, I suppose, at
Sure.
known associates to him.
Yeah.
I would imagine there's a lot that is not out there in the public domain.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I think.
Again, though, perhaps it's gone cold.
Yeah, maybe. I think there is, with these cases, there is only so much you can do. And, you know, if he did have financial problems, does that have a bearing on it? Well, probably not, unless somebody was coming after him for money. But even then, it doesn't explain, the manner of his death, and certainly doesn't explain that voicemail. Okay, let's move on to the next case now, which is I hate to use the term favourite, but it's one of those ones that I come to again and again and again, and there's so much stuff out there. There's a video of this young girl, and there are also social media accounts for her, some of which I suspect might be fake. But we're talking about Eliza Lam. Would you like to take us through the basics on this story, please, Steph?
Well, Eliza Lam was a Canadian student who had taken some time out of her studies and decided to go and do a bit of traveling. So leaving Canada, ended up in Los Angeles and was staying in a hotel called the Cecil Hotel, which actually was not probably the best kind of hotel to stay in. It wasn't very upmarket, and anybody who lived around there would have said it's not a really good place to go. Had a bad reputation in terms of having had serial killers operating there, and even one was living there back in the days. Well, she'd actually been reported as missing for about 5 days, and the police had actually released a missing persons report and also a video, but this wasn't really widely known until guests in the hotel, this was back in February 2013, the guests in the hotel started complaining that the water tasted funny in their rooms and looked a little bit discoloured. So the hotel asked their maintenance man to go up onto the roof of the hotel to take a look at the water tank, which he did. And inside he found Eliza Lam's naked body and her clothes nearby, and clearly she was obviously dead. And it was then that people picked up on the fact that there was also this video recording of her taken inside the hotel, which showed her last sort of known movements. And the video is very, very strange, and this is what again caught everybody's attention, because she is seen entering the lift or the elevator of the hotel, and she presses all of the buttons. So rather than just press the down button, she presses a sequence of buttons, and then whilst waiting for the door to close, she peeks out and looks into the corridor, which we can't see very much of on the video. And she looks around, she comes back in, she gets out again, peeks a bit further, disappears from view down the corridor, comes back into the lift. And at this stage, that's when she begins to look a little bit distressed. Now, it has to be said that she had a history of having been diagnosed with bipolar disorder. And there were traces of the pills that she took in the autopsy. So it appeared that she was probably taking them, but she may have come off them or not taken the dose she needed. So this could all be explained perhaps by a manic episode, but that's the most obvious answer. But it was really the behaviour in the lift that struck people, because the door doesn't close at all, and you could say, well, that's because she pressed all of the buttons. It's malfunctioned.
Yeah, I did wonder about that.
Yeah, but you also wonder, was she talking to somebody in the corridor? Why was she peeking out? Was somebody there? Was somebody threatening her in some way? Because she's now in the elevator again, and she's starting to wring her hands together as though she's in distress, and she is making hand gestures, almost as though she's talking to somebody. And she also puts her hands up as though she can see somebody there in front of her, and she's trying to touch them, or she thinks somebody's there, but you can't see anybody there, obviously. So why is she doing that? Now, again, you could say somebody has laced a drink and they've drugged her, perhaps.
Sure.
Other people said, well, look, if you look really closely at this video, you'll see disembodied faces and black shadows, and something is in the elevator with her. Well, a skeptic would say that's just the quality of the video. But there is also the fact that it's probably been tampered with, the video itself. The surveillance footage that was taken, the security footage, has probably been tampered with. Well, so the video goes viral really because nobody can understand why she ended up in the water tank. Well, the tank was supposed to be only accessible by a locked door. Well, perhaps the lock was open and it was supposed to be alarmed.
Sure.
Perhaps the alarm wasn't on. It was 15 feet up to get into the tank, and a lot of people would say, well, she couldn't have done that herself. She couldn't have lifted the lid off. And if she did, why on earth did she end up getting into the tank? Was somebody chasing her? Did somebody take her up there and put her in it? So there's all these possibilities. And it did lead to lots of debate on the internet, and still does. Interestingly, I found something really fascinated me was that a man called Dr. James Douglas Cottrell, who calls himself the equivalent or the follow-on from Edgar Cayce. Well, Edgar Cayce was very famous for being able to go into a trance and diagnose if people had illnesses, and also diagnose things, give predictions and things that would happen in the future.
Okay.
And he was supposed to be very, very accurate. Well, this man is his what's the word? Progressor.
Protege or just
yes,
successor? Yeah, no, that's
yes.
fine.
And he said, he made a video that I found, and he said, I tell you what happened, while I'm in a trance, I'll say what happened. He said she was receiving messages that were being beamed into her head. And this was being done by a figure that was standing on the roof, and the figure was all in black, and it was either wearing a balaclava or it had a hood on. And he said it was either incarnate or discarnate. It was either alive or it was a dead spirit. And he said that it was using some kind of laser type thing that was beaming self-destructive instructions into her head, and it was telling her to kill herself. Well, you know, is that possible? Well, the funny thing about it is as well that she did, as you say, had an active social media, but not many photos on it. But she had tweeted just prior to her disappearance. She'd shared a message about a Canadian company being given funding from the Pentagon to develop cloaking technology that would make soldiers invisible.
Yes.
And it's something that's been going on, I think, with defence companies. And there was also the suggestion that somebody was saying that if you look on Google Maps, you'll find a company that exists right next door to that hotel, and it's called the Invisible Light Agency. Well, I have to say, when I tried to find it without going through the links that these people had put up, I couldn't see it there.
Is that because it's invisible?
Yeah.
Or... Sorry.
Is it? Yeah, it is invisible. Yeah, so it's there, but you can't see it.
Yeah.
So and their specialism. So some people say this company does exist there, and that they specialize in using waves of energy that will bend light and make things invisible. But this goes on because there was a TB test.
Well, I was going to ask about this because this is one of the most peculiar aspects of this story. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you short, please.
Yeah. Well, the test was called Lam Elisa, but it was developed in 2009, and it was a testing kit that can be used to pick up a particular strain of TB, which can be rife. Once it starts, it can be very contagious. Well, so people really were focusing on this and saying, what did it mean? And I don't know. What does it mean? Does it mean that she was given, of course, that she was put into the water? Does it mean that, let's say she was infected with TB and it was a plot to spread the disease through the water and give it to people and then, you know, use drugs on them to see what could resist it? Or was it some kind of biological weapon testing, you know?
It's really, really strange. I mean, I've looked up that test online. It does exist, and it is called exactly that, the Lam Elisa test. And now, I suppose what you have to do is sort of suspend disbelief for a minute and just say, right, okay, is there actually a link between the two, or is it just that it's two people with transposed names, or sorry, a kit with a transposed name of a person, or vice versa? What some people appear to be saying is that, you know, some deep dark government agency are doing these tests, as you mentioned just there, and as a bit of a joke, they gave her a name. Which was the exact opposite of the test used to discover it. I don't know how I feel about that. I think that's perhaps pushing it a little too far, but that's my own opinion on it. I think that the very peculiar thing about the whole story is literally the fact that she's turned up in the water tank on the roof. So she was found in there naked. Do you know? Were the clothes actually in the tank as well, or were they found somewhere else?
If I can remember correctly, they were inside the tank.
Okay, so so it's possible that she may have undressed herself, but it's an incredibly strange thing to do. This article that I was reading was suggesting, well, yes, there's a locked door to get up to the roof. It also had an alarm on it. The ladder to get up to the water tank, you had to jump up to get hold of it. It just strikes me as it's so many obstacles just to appear up there. Now, the video, when you watch it, and for anybody who wants to see it, it's on YouTube on various different programs there, and some of it's got talking over, but the best one is really just the one that shows the CCTV footage. I must admit, I don't see any faces in there or anything like that, just digital artifacts because of the poor quality of the footage. But she does act in an incredibly strange way. When she walks into the lift, it's just like she walks in normally. I don't see anything particularly strange with that. It's like she becomes aware of something after she's inside. I really don't know what to make of it. But again, now this takes me on to something else. She is a Canadian student, and I'm not sure what her background is, whether she's Korean, Chinese, or whatever country her forebears may have come from. But there was a cult movie from the Far East called is it Dark Water?
Dark Waters.
Yeah, I've never seen it. Have you seen that?
No, I haven't seen it.
Okay. So as I understand it, in Dark Waters, a dead body is hidden in a water tank in a block of flats, and then people start complaining about the quality of the water coming out of it. So, and people go, oh, well, that's suspicious in itself because it mirrors a movie. Well, the thing is, also, movies mirror real life. There are only so many ideas which are new. So who knows? I mean, how many times have you heard of dead pigeons getting into water tanks and that not being particularly nice? But there we are.
I think the strangest thing about it as well is, and now this didn't sort of come out when I was looking into it, and bearing in mind I might be a bit rusty on these because I was doing it sort of 2 or 3 years ago, but
Sure.
I don't remember coming across this, and the fact that it seems that she entered the hotel and was last seen in the company of 2 men, and they had a box which they gave to her.
Oh, no, I'd not heard of this.
Yeah. What was in the box?
Don't know.
Don't know.
Don't know.
And who were the men?
And I don't know.
No.
Okay. Well, I need to do some more reading. That's obvious.
So do I.
You were saying that you were telling me off air earlier on that you're going to be reinvestigating this one yourself.
Yes, Elisa and Henry, I'm going to be reinvestigating because, as I say, I feel really rusty at the moment because I kind of looked into it when they first happened, and a lot can be developed, in the next sort of in the last 18 months that is probably going to take weeks and weeks to go through. I'm also talking to somebody who, for his own, I suppose we call safety really, and of course that confidentiality, I think has got some very important information for me about the Eliza Lam case. Whether I will be able to utilize that, because the thing is, I even got to a stage at one point when I was looking into it where I thought this is a hoax, because if you try and find some of the people who were supposedly investigating it, or coroner's assistants and things, it's very difficult to find information on some of these people. So I almost came around to thinking, okay, this is some kind of hoax here, but it's not. It's definitely not. But that's how you can really go round and round and never quite know where you're going with things. And now, obviously, I'm speaking to somebody who is very much telling me, no, this is certainly not a hoax, and it's not some kind of thing that was created to do a movie. It really happened. But the mystery posts on Tumblr and Twitter and things. Well, again, that continued on after she died. But these can be set to pre-post, so you can set them to go up on a scheduled date. Sort of calendar, diarise these posts to come. So it could be that she'd done that, but then other people say, well, why was somebody posting things on behalf of her when she disappeared and died?
That's right. I mean, I saw her Instagram account, or an account that's been suggested that it was hers, and all of the pictures that are on it, apart from the one that's used for the actual avatar for the account, appear to be just rubbish stock photos, which nobody in their right mind would actually post unless they're just testing out or something like that. But I mean, I'm on Instagram, and I stick stuff up there that makes sense to me, but I can't imagine that the stuff that's on there makes sense to anybody, to be fair.
No, it's all very cryptic, isn't it? And I mean, she did do some posts before she died, and I don't know, it's kind of sort of quite emotional, perhaps, because I think she did sort of maybe get depressed at times, things like that. So there's all of that as well. And there's even somebody even found that on a different sort of note, Alistair Crowley actually stayed in the Cecil Hotel in London, so not in LA, but he'd written a poem called Jephthah, and the character in the poem is called Sela, which is an anagram of Elisa, and the poem is actually about a judge who willingly offers his daughter up to be sacrificed in water. So there are so many different ways you can read into this story, which is, of course, why people find it fascinating. Because, again, it could be the fact that very, very sadly somebody took her from inside the hotel, took her up to the roof, and they killed her. And that's it.
Good grief.
And that's very possible that that's what happened. But
it is. I was going to say we'll take a quick break, Steph, and we'll come back straight afterwards, and then and we'll move on to some other bits. But I think the story of Eliza Lam is one that's going to run and run, as they say.
Indeed.
Okay, we'll be back after these words. And we're back. Hello. So an amazing hour so far with Steph Young, author and researcher and collector of mystery stories. Steph, we spoke so far about the mysterious disappearances and deaths of Henry McCabe and Eliza Lam. Your work as a writer and researcher encompasses an awful lot more than this, and I noticed that you also do some books about strange things in the woods. I didn't ask you to sort of go and revise all of that stuff for this interview, but I just wonder, could you give us a quick taster of the other things that we could find in your books?
Well, some of the things you could find in the woods are, for example, a man was in the Ansonia National Reserve in America, Connecticut, and this was back in 2011, and he said that he often would go there in the nature reserve for late night walks, and he happened to be out there at about 3 a.m. one night, and it was a very bright moon, so he could see very, very clearly, and it was quite open, the area that he was walking in, when all of a sudden he saw a deer, and it came skitting across the path in front of him, and it was very spooked, but he said it wasn't spooked by him, it was running from something. And he said it just went eerily quiet then after that, as though something was about to happen. But he carried on walking along the path, and he was on open terrain, but it ran parallel to the woods. And he said, then I suddenly noticed about 25 yards ahead of me, I could see this figure. It was a crouching figure, and it was standing in a really aggressive posture, looking straight at me. And he said, I already knew. Subconsciously, I knew that this was not human. It was almost of an alien type thing. And he said, yeah, I know that there would be other logical explanations, but I can't find one because it was glowing a blue-grey colour. And he said I could see from the moon, and it was naked as well. It had an oversized head. Its arms and legs were really skinny, and yet to him it still seemed human in form. But he said it was very athletic looking, very strong looking, but it was in this posture like it was ready, and it was aggressive, and it was intensely focused on him. And he said, I couldn't see any eyes, yet I knew it was staring straight at me. And he said, it was like we were in a standoff, like we were two animals guarding our terrain. And he said, I felt as if I'd stumbled onto this entity too soon, almost as though he'd been there waiting for me, but I'd come along too soon, and now it was really alert. And he said what it did was it turned and it suddenly ran very, very athletically and very fast back into the woods. And he heard the bushes. But he said the trees were so thick that really this thing couldn't have got through into the trees and been running at that speed, because it couldn't have got through the trees and the bushes that fast. But he said, you know, I know I'm going to be ridiculed, but there was this strange energy about this thing. And he said, I know that it had danger and I know that it was waiting there to ambush me, but I'd come across it too soon and I'd seen it. And he managed to sort of carry along on the path, because he had to come out of the woods and the nature reserve. But he said all that time I had this feeling that it was going to come back. And, and he said the way it ran off, it was in a very, very confident way. It didn't run off scared from me. It ran off in a very regimented, very controlled way, as if to say, well, I'll come and get you another time, okay? That would just really chill me, that story.
Is just, I would have been out of there like a shot.
I'd have been running the other way.
I mean, there was a time I went up to Rendlesham Forest to have a look around there. I mean, we all know about the story at Rendlesham Forest. But I don't know, there's just something about being in a place like that where... you get the, especially if your brain is in that particular mood that day, you just suddenly get the feeling that you're being watched. And, it's probably paranoia and it's probably absolutely nothing, but it does happen. And then when you hear stories about people that this has actually happened to, and then you kind of wonder, why would anybody go in there anyway? I've got friends over in the States, as I know you have, and a friend of mine lives in Portland in Oregon, and obviously it's just forest for as far as the eye can see, and he goes out camping in the woods there, and I just don't know how he does it. I really don't. Well, there we go. Steph, you have been an absolutely amazing guest, and I really am grateful to you for coming on the show this evening. I think it's only fair, if somebody wants to find you, I know you're on Facebook. You also have a new group on Facebook as well, which will turn up if somebody types your name in. Just tell us a little bit about your books, a couple of the titles, and where people can get them from.
They're all on Amazon, but they are as Stephen, so they're Stephen Young. But and yes, Facebook, Steph Young author. Welcome to come along.
Sure.
And that's it, really. Yeah.
That's fabulous. Steph, thanks ever so much. And I think, from everybody here, it's happy Christmas to you and yours. And we'll speak to you again early next year, hopefully.
Thank you so much for having me on, Paul, and happy Christmas to you and all of your listeners. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Steph. Take care now.
Take care.
Anomaly is independent media. Comments and beliefs of guests do not necessarily reflect the views of those behind this podcast. Thank you to Dutch musician Michette for our great theme tune. Visit his site at michette.com or look for his work on SoundCloud. Please visit our website at anomaly.co.uk and email us through studio@anomaly.co.uk. You can follow us on Twitter at AnomalyCast. Watch out for the latest episode of Anomaly.